Hey guys, this is Paul, and this new 2021 iMac brought one of the biggest changes to the iMac lineup that we've seen possibly ever. It's colorful, it's thin, and of course it has that new M1 chip housed inside. I can tell you right off the bat that I do really enjoy using this computer, but there were still a number of questionable decisions that were made in terms of this iMac's design that I think you should be aware of before purchasing. But before we get into that, let's start off on a positive note and talk about my number one favorite thing about this iMac redesign, that 24-inch 4.5K display. Now, it's technically 23.5 inches if we're nitpicking, so it is a bit on the small side, but if you aren't concerned about having a particularly large display, I'd say this is big enough for the majority of people. It has a pixel density of 218 pixels per inch, so it's super sharp. It also has a max brightness of 500 nits, which is great for almost any indoor lighting scenario. And it has that P3 wide color gamut, so you get a wide range of vibrant colors. Viewing angles are pretty good, and the screen glare isn't too bad either. And because of its squarish design, I thought this iMac might have a 16:10 display like we see on some of the MacBooks, but no, it's 16:9, so any 16:9 content will fill the entire display and it looks great. This display just makes using the iMac so enjoyable, and I find that I actually prefer this display over my 27-inch LG 4K monitor that I previously used with my desktop setup. So the display itself is fantastic, but I have mixed opinions about this white bezel that borders the display. I know it might look weird if there was a black bezel with the colored chin at the bottom, but I find the white to be a bit distracting, especially when I'm editing colors with photo and video. It kind of messes with my perception of white balance a little bit. But when I'm not working with color and I don't really need to care about color accuracy, I don't really mind the white bezel that much. The iMac stand allows you to tilt the display up and down, which covers most viewing angles, but it doesn't allow for height adjustment, which is disappointing. Personally, I find it to be a bit on the short side, and the only way to adjust that is to put something underneath the entire iMac, like a monitor stand or something like that. Alternatively, if you own a VESA mount, Apple does sell a separate version of the iMac without the stand. Instead, it has a VESA mount adapter. In the back of the stand, there's this hole which you can thread the power cable through for clean cable management. The new power cable, by the way, is braided, and it has these powerful magnets that connect to the iMac with a really satisfying snap. It might be tempting to call this MagSafe because it's magnetic, but it's not actually all that safe because if you trip on this cable, the magnets are so strong that you have a good chance of bringing the iMac down along with it. So just keep that in mind when you're deciding where you might place this iMac. The power cable is attached to the external power supply, and if you purchase the upgraded model of the iMac, you'll get an Ethernet port included in the power supply, which is a nice touch that helps with cable management if you're planning on using a wired internet connection. Okay, so let's talk about that chin at the bottom of the iMac. This is probably the most controversial part of the design, especially considering that some people say the chin could have just been avoided altogether by making the iMac just a bit thicker. But the more I use the computer, the less I actually mind the chin. I think it's kind of like the notch on the iPhone in the sense that after a couple days of using it, you really just don't notice it that much. So in my opinion, it's not quite as big of a deal as most people are making it out to be. But another defining feature of the new iMac is its color. No matter what color you choose, you'll get a deep, bold color on the back and a lighter, kind of pastelish color on the front, with the silver iMac being the exception. The thing I keep thinking about though when it comes to color is whether or not I'll start to get sick of this color over time. The average buyer of this computer will probably use it for, anywhere from 3 to 5+ years, and that's a long time to have this much color as part of your setup. For that reason, I'm starting to wish that I went with the silver for a more neutral color option. The color of the iMac also applies to the power cable, the included braided lightning cable, and the Magic Keyboard and Magic Mouse that are included with every iMac purchase. The Magic Keyboard is very similar to the older Magic Keyboard, except that it has these slightly rounded corners, but typing feels exactly the same. And since I went with the upgraded version of the iMac, I also got the new Touch ID keyboard, which is great. So now I can unlock my iMac using my fingerprint, I can use it to make purchases, all that good stuff. If you go with the base model iMac, you can still decide to upgrade the keyboard to include Touch ID for an additional $50. The Magic Mouse is virtually identical to the older Magic Mouse, although the top is a bit more dull gray compared to the older bright white. And this would have been the perfect opportunity to finally update the charging situation on the Magic Mouse, but no, you still have to charge it like this. One of the weakest aspects of the iMac is the port situation. On the base model iMac, you just get 2 Thunderbolt USB 4 ports, and that's it. And if you decide to upgrade, you just get 2 additional USB 3 ports. I think if you're paying $1,300 for an all-in-one computer, you should get more than just 2 ports. I've already ran into situations where I could have used an extra port on this 4-port model, so that's definitely one of the areas that Apple cut the corners a little bit. The headphone jack is now located on the left-hand side of the computer, which makes it a little bit easier to use wired headphones if that's your thing. The speakers have also been updated. They're these bottom-firing speakers lining the entire bottom edge of the panel. And I have to say, these are probably the best built-in computer speakers of any device I've ever used. But with that being said, any dedicated desktop speakers will probably sound better. Even these budget $30 speakers from Logitech just have a much fuller sound. But for the average user, I think you'd be surprisingly satisfied with just the built-in sound out of this iMac. The new webcam has been updated to 1080p, so it looks a little bit better, and the microphones have been improved. So this is more than usable for any Zoom or FaceTime calls, which is pretty much the only thing I'd use this camera for. And then there's the performance of this computer, and that goes hand in hand with the configuration setup that you select. And in some ways, that's easier than it's ever been before because every iMac just has the same M1 chip inside, but that might make it confusing if you're not sure what upgrades you're actually paying for. So to help you guys out with that, if you're debating between the base model iMac and the $200 upgrade on Apple's website, here's all the differences. $200 more will get you 8 GPU cores versus 7 on the base model. You'll get those 2 additional USB 3 ports on the back. You'll get an Ethernet port included in the power supply, and that keyboard upgrade to include Touch ID. Performance-wise, there won't be a huge difference between those two. You might see a 10 to 15% boost in graphics-related performance due to that extra graphics core, but I'd mainly recommend this option if you think you get use out of those extra USB 3 ports and the Touch ID on the Magic Keyboard. But if you're really concerned about performance, I think the more important upgrade to consider is to upgrade from 8 GB of RAM to 16 GB for $200. With my M1 MacBook Air, I had issues with its 8 GB of RAM. It struggled with editing 4K footage in Final Cut. Basically, any RAM-intensive tasks slowed it down a lot. So I decided to upgrade this iMac to 16 GB of RAM, and I'm really glad that I did. It has no problems editing and exporting my 4K videos, and I have pretty much 0 issues with performance in daily use with this iMac. And just for fun, I did test out a bit of gaming with Fortnite, and it was able to run on high 1080p settings, hovering around 40 FPS. So while this is still by no means a gaming machine, you might be able to get by with a little bit of gaming here and there. So to kind of summarize all my thoughts about this iMac, it's nice, I really like it. With its colorful design with the chin and the white bezels, it's clear that this isn't meant to be a pro-level device. Although I could argue that many professionals could still get by and still be happy with this iMac. So while I still really enjoy using this machine, I think personally, I'm gonna wait for an update to the iMac Pro lineup because in the long run, I think I might want something with a slightly larger display, something with black bezels, and maybe a little bit more power just to future-proof myself for years to come. But if things like that aren't important for your needs, then I think you'd be more than happy with this 2021 iMac. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.